I can still picture it clearly, standing on what should have been my own front porch, staring at a woman who had stationed herself like a living barricade between my wife, Mia, and our new home. She crossed her arms as if she were the gatekeeper of some sacred temple, her floral blazer practically screaming middle management. She blocked the door like she was guarding Fort Knox. Her blonde hair, sprayed into submission, didn't budge in the breeze, and her lipstick was such a violent shade of red it could probably be seen from orbit. That was my first encounter with Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of Willowbrook Estates, HOA president extraordinaire. She looked me square in the eye and, with a voice soaked in condescension, declared, "I don't care what paperwork you think you have. Nobody moves into this neighborhood without my approval, and I haven't given it." Mia's grip on my hand tightened. We stood there like bewildered tourists in our own driveway, while curtains twitched up and down the street. Our brand-new neighbors were clearly enjoying the spectacle, and we hadn't even unpacked a single box. My name is Alex, and 3 months earlier, Mia and I had scraped together every last cent to buy our first home. We thought we'd found a quiet suburban paradise. Willowbrook Estates boasted good schools, low crime, and houses that actually fit within our budget. We thought we had done our homework. What we hadn't accounted for was Karen Peaton, the HOA president who seemed to believe she was running her own private dictatorship. Rather than a community association, the realtor had assured us that the HOA was active. According to her, that was a positive thing. They keep the neighborhood tidy. They help property values stay strong. What she failed to mention was that Karen had spent 7 years transforming the association into her personal empire. She created unwritten rules that existed nowhere in the official bylaws, formed secret committees known only to her, and cultivated a network of busybody spies who reported on everything, from the length of grass in someone's yard to the color of their garden hose. On the morning of our move-in, things began perfectly. The sky was clear, the moving truck arrived right on schedule, and Mia was practically glowing with excitement. We'd planned every detail for months, packing, scheduling time off, and daydreaming about finally having a space that was ours. That dream lasted exactly 15 minutes. As soon as the movers began unloading, Karen materialized, as if she had been hiding behind a tree waiting for the moment. She marched across her pristine lawn in absurdly high heels that clicked against the pavement like a metronome of doom. In one hand, she held a clipboard. In the other, a folder so overstuffed with papers it looked like she was preparing for a corporate merger. "Excuse me," she barked, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You cannot proceed until I've reviewed your application and completed the vetting process." The head mover, Tony, a burly man with 20 years of experience and a face that had clearly seen it all, froze mid-step and stared at her like she had sprouted horns. Trying to keep things friendly, I stepped forward with a smile. "Hi, I'm Alex. This is my wife, Mia. We just closed on this house last Friday. I think there's been a mix-up. We own the property." I even produced our closing documents, certain that the sight of official papers would end the nonsense. Karen gave them a single glance before flicking her hand as though swatting away a fly. "I don't care what some bank told you," she said, dripping arrogance. "This is my neighborhood and procedures must be followed. Since you failed to contact me beforehand, you'll have to remove your belongings immediately and return after the paperwork is complete." The movers stood there awkwardly with boxes in their arms. Neighbors lingered nearby, pretending to rake leaves or water plants while blatantly eavesdropping. Mia stepped forward, her patience stretched to its limit. Normally, she's the most even-tempered person you'll ever meet. But Karen had hit a nerve. "Ma'am, I think you misunderstand how property ownership works," Mia said evenly, though I could hear the steel in her voice. "We legally own this house. We don't need your permission to move into property we've purchased." Karen's face turned the exact shade of her eyeshadow, a blotchy purple. "How dare you speak to me like that?" she shrieked. "I am the president of this HOA. I have the authority to stop undesirable elements from lowering our community standards. You will not move one more thing until I say so." To make her point, she actually placed a hand on one of Tony's boxes as if she were going to physically prevent him from working. Tony raised an eyebrow at me, silently asking if this circus was real or if he had walked onto the set of a prank show. With practiced patience, he said, "Lady, I don't know what your problem is, but these folks hired me to move their stuff into this house, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. If you want a neighborhood fight, take it up after I finish the job." Karen's answer was to whip out her phone and begin dialing. "I'm calling the police," she announced dramatically, loud enough for every house on the block to hear. "These people are trespassing, and this moving company is assisting in criminal activity." She said it with such seriousness, you'd think we were burglars caught mid-heist rather than homeowners unloading furniture. That was the breaking point. I'd been trying to keep calm, trying to de-escalate, but hearing her threaten to have us arrested for moving into our own house snapped something inside me. The sarcastic side of my personality, the one I usually keep locked down, came roaring out. "You know what, Karen?" I announced loudly, making sure every neighbor within earshot caught it. "You're absolutely right. We should call the police. In fact, let me do that for you." I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, standing in plain view of the crowd. "911, what's your emergency?" the dispatcher asked. "Hello," I said, locking eyes with Karen. "I need to report harassment and illegal obstruction of private property. A woman is blocking my family and me from entering our legally owned home and has threatened our moving crew. She's also filing false reports about us trespassing on our own property." Karen's face drained from purple to ghostly white so quickly I thought she might collapse. Her phone was still in her hand, but she'd stopped pressing the buttons. The cluster of neighbors kept growing, and I noticed some of them smiling. Clearly, we weren't the first to clash with Queen Karen. The dispatcher remained professional and assured me officers would arrive within 10 minutes. Meanwhile, Karen was frantically digging through her folder, muttering about regulations and procedures, glancing up at me with a mixture of fury and panic, as though she couldn't believe anyone dared to defy her. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," she snapped, attempting to regain her composure. "I have connections in this town. I know people. You'll regret this." It felt like I was watching a cartoon villain recite their big monologue, except somehow less convincing. When the police cruiser finally arrived, Karen bolted toward it like she was welcoming her personal cavalry. "Officers! Thank goodness you're here," she gushed, her voice suddenly syrupy and sweet. "These people are trying to move into a house without proper authorization. They're violating multiple HOA rules and refusing to follow procedure." Two officers, a younger man who looked new to the job and an older woman with the world weary face of someone who'd seen everything, listened politely to Karen's speech before. Heading over to us. "Good afternoon," the older officer said in a calm but firm tone. "I'm Officer Martinez and this is Officer Johnson. We were called about a property dispute. Can you explain the situation?" I handed over our stack of documents, the closing papers, the deed, driver's licenses, and insurance. "We bought this house, closed last Friday, and today we're moving in. That woman has been preventing us from entering our own property and has been threatening our movers. She claims we need her permission to live here." Officer Martinez reviewed the paperwork while Johnson jotted notes. Everything was clear. We were the legal owners. Karen, however, hovered nearby, clutching her folder like it was a magical shield. "Ma'am," Officer Martinez finally said, turning to Karen, "can you show me any legal authority that gives you the right to block these homeowners from accessing their property?" Karen strutted forward, yanking papers from her folder. "Right here!" The bylaws clearly say all new residents must go through the approval process. Section 4, subsection 2, paragraph C requires pre-occupancy verification. Martinez carefully scanned the pages while Karen stood there looking smug. After a long silence, the officer lifted her head, unimpressed. "Ma'am, HOA bylaws don't grant you the power to bar property owners from their own homes. They typically deal with landscaping or architectural rules, not access rights. You cannot stop these people from moving in." Karen's confidence wavered. "But I'm the president," she insisted. "It's my responsibility to protect community standards. These people could be anyone. Criminals, drug dealers. Ma'am, are you refusing to let these homeowners enter their property?" Johnson asked, pen poised. "I'm protecting this neighborhood," Karen protested shrilly. "Someone has to uphold standards." That's when Martinez's patience snapped. Ma'am, step away immediately and allow them to proceed, or you'll be arrested for harassment and obstruction. Karen looked desperately at the neighbors. But instead of support, she saw smirks, phones raised for pictures, and people quietly reveling in her downfall. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, retreating toward her house. "This isn't over. I'll file complaints with the city, the county, the state. I'll contact my lawyer. You people don't know what trouble you've started." For a brief moment, it seemed the ordeal was over. The movers resumed unloading. Martinez returned our documents with a sympathetic smile, and Mia and I started to believe we could settle in peacefully. But of course, Karen wasn't finished. 20 minutes later, as Tony's crew carried our couch through the front door, she returned, this time armed with a measuring tape, a camera, and a citation book. She snapped photos of the truck, measured the distance from the curb, and scribbled on her clipboard. "Excuse me?" she called out in her best official tone. "Your moving vehicle is parked illegally. HOA rules state that commercial vehicles cannot remain on residential streets for more than 30 minutes without a permit. You've been here over an hour." I walked over, forcing myself to stay calm. "Karen, the police were just here." "They told you to leave us alone. What are you doing now?" "I'm enforcing HOA regulations," she replied, her confidence rekindled. "This isn't about your move, it's about unlawful parking. That truck has to go or I'm calling a tow." And sure enough, she had her phone out again, apparently dialing a towing company. I was astonished by just how petty and vindictive this woman could be. Despite being instructed by police officers to back off, she remained fixated on controlling the situation, constantly devising new ways to harass us. "You know what, Karen?" I said, producing my phone once more. "You're right. We absolutely need to involve the authorities." For the second time that day, I dialed 911, an unwelcome personal record. "What's your emergency?" "Hi, this is Alex from Willowbrook Estates again. The same woman who harassed us earlier is back, attempting to have our moving truck illegally towed. Officers already warned her to stop interfering, yet she's escalating her harassment. Officer Martinez arrived alone this time, and Karen's face drained of color as she realized she might have gone too far. She was still on the phone with the towing company when the police car pulled up. "Ma'am," Officer Martinez said, his voice now stripped of patience. "Haven't I already told you to leave these people alone?" "I'm not harassing anyone," Karen replied defensively. "I'm enforcing legitimate parking rules. Their truck is illegally parked, and as HOA president, I have the authority to have it removed." Officer Martinez approached to inspect our moving truck, which was parked entirely legally on the public street. He measured the distance from the curb, checked for signs, and even called in to confirm there were no special parking restrictions in our neighborhood. "Ma'am, this vehicle is legally parked," Officer Martinez said once he finished. "There are no violations. Your HOA position does not give you authority to tow legally parked vehicles." "But the HOA bylaws clearly state—" Karen began. "Ma'am," Officer Martinez interrupted, "I'll stop you right there. HOA bylaws cannot override city or state parking laws. You cannot tow legally parked vehicles from public streets. Continuing this behavior will result in your arrest for harassment and filing false reports." Karen sputtered for a moment, trying to think of another way to create problems. Then she made her worst mistake. Instead of leaving, she doubled down. "I don't care what you say," she shouted. "This is my neighborhood, and I decide who can live here. These people are not welcome, and I will do whatever it takes to get rid of them." Officer Martinez studied her for a moment, then sighed and reached for his handcuffs. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for harassment and obstruction of property rights. You have the right to remain silent." The shock on Karen's face was priceless. Her mouth dropped open, her eyes widened, and for the first time all day, she was utterly speechless. As Officer Martinez cuffed her wrists, she finally seemed to understand that her imagined authority had collided with real-world consequences. "You can't arrest me," she protested weakly as she was led to the police car. "I'm the HOA president. I was protecting the neighborhood. These people are the ones breaking the law. Being HOA president does not give you the right to harass neighbors or interfere with their legal property rights," Officer Martinez patiently explained while placing her in the back seat. As the police car drove away with Karen inside, the neighbors watching erupted in cheers. Tony and his crew, who had been navigating the chaos, finally had a clear path to complete our move. Mia and I stood in the driveway hand in hand, watching our belongings disappear into our new home. "Well," Mia said with a shaky laugh, "this definitely wasn't in any of the home-buying guides we read." In the weeks that followed, we discovered the full consequences of Karen's actions. The harassment charges stuck, and she ended up paying over $3,000 in fines and legal fees. Even more importantly, the HOA held an emergency election, and Karen was removed from her position by an 87-3 vote. The new board immediately revised the bylaws to prevent future power hungry. Presidents from harassing new residents and formally apologized to us and several other families subjected to Karen's unauthorized oversight over the years. As expected, Karen's reaction was dramatic. At the election meeting, she screamed that the neighborhood would collapse without her leadership, property values would plummet, and everyone would regret removing her. Security escorted her out of the community center while she continued ranting about ungrateful neighbors and elaborate conspiracies.